The human fleet hung in the darkness of space, a fragile line of silver and gray ships against the endless black. Stars blinked coldly beyond the shields, but the warmth of hope had faded long ago. They were outnumbered, 10-1, and at the center of the enemy formation floated the dark, monstrous flagship, black as a void, bristling with weapons and pulsing with a strange, almost living energy. Commander Yaren stood on the bridge of the human command ship, his hands shaking as he stared at the enemy. "We can't hold them," he said, his voice tight. "They'll tear us apart before we even get close." Around him, officers whispered to one another, faces pale. The alarms blared constantly, red lights casting harsh shadows over every worried expression. Outside, smaller human ships darted like frightened fish, scanning for weak points, praying for a miracle that they did not believe in. But in the center of the chaos, one figure moved with calm precision, Captain Elara Kor. She walked steadily across the bridge, her boots making no sound on the metal floor. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, her eyes sharp and cold. She did not speak, but her presence demanded attention. Even Yaren, who had been doubting every decision for hours, felt a strange certainty when he looked at her. This one human, small and alone among the fearful, carried a kind of quiet power that the fleet had never seen before. Elara stopped at the central console and placed her hand on the glowing surface. "I will board their flagship," she said, her voice clear and calm. "Alone." The room went silent. Officers blinked at her as if she had just announced she would walk into a star and return. "Alone?" Yaren finally managed to ask. "You can't." "I can," her gaze cutting through the fear. "We don't have the fleet for a head-on attack. The flagship is the key. Destroy it and their formation will collapse. We've lost too many already. This is our chance to end it before we're all gone." Murmurs ran through the bridge. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others, younger officers with nothing to lose, felt a spark of hope. Elara had always been underestimated. That was her advantage. They thought her reckless. They thought she would fail. But she was no ordinary human. She turned to the small shuttle waiting in the docking bay. Its hull was sleek, almost fragile compared to the monstrous alien ship looming ahead. But inside, it carried every piece of equipment she could need. Explosives, hacking tools, stealth systems, human ingenuity packed into a tiny vessel. Her eyes lingered on the enemy flagship. It seemed to pulse as if alive, like a dark heart beating in the void. Her stomach tightened, but not with fear. She welcomed the challenge. She had faced impossible odds before. This would be no different. As she climbed into the shuttle, the fleet watched in tense silence. Engines hummed, lights flickered. The docking bay doors closed, sealing her inside. "Good luck, Captain," whispered Yaren, but he did not really believe she would need it. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but sometimes that unpredictability was the sharpest weapon in the galaxy. The shuttle detached and glided toward the enemy flagship, moving silently through the void. The human fleet shrank behind her, tiny and fragile, but their eyes never left her progress. Every second felt stretched, as though time itself had slowed to watch her approach. Inside the shuttle, Elara checked her systems again. Shields at maximum, engines stable, stealth systems active. Every light on the console was green. She exhaled slowly. There was no turning back. Once she crossed that invisible line into enemy space, she would be on her own. No one would come for her. Failure meant death. Outside, the alien ships patrolled with methodical precision. Their weapons scanned the darkness, searching for any sign of movement. But they were not designed to anticipate something human: ingenuity, courage, and the willingness to risk everything. The flagship grew larger as she approached, a dark mountain floating in space. Its surface was covered in spikes, turrets, and strange glowing panels that pulsed with an alien light. From a distance, it looked like a living creature, and Elara could feel the subtle hum of its power vibrating through the shuttle. She had faced many dangers, but this was different. This was more than a ship. This was a fortress, a challenge that demanded all of her skill. Her hand hovered over the controls. The plan was simple. Slip past the outer defenses, enter the hull, find the core, and strike. But nothing in human history had ever been simple when facing this enemy. Every corridor, every patrol, every trap could be her last mistake. She activated the stealth drive, and the shuttle shimmered, blending into the darkness. Sensors showed multiple patrols moving along the hull. She adjusted her trajectory, timing her approach to pass between them like a shadow. As she neared the docking bay, an alarm suddenly flared on the enemy ship. A patrol had detected a slight anomaly. Her heart skipped a beat. One wrong move and everything would end. But Ilara did not panic. She moved faster, smarter, weaving between beams of light, her shuttle almost becoming part of the dark space itself. The docking bay doors opened just a fraction, and she slipped inside. The shuttle entered the heart of the enemy flagship, and the massive doors sealed shut behind her. Silence enveloped the craft. Inside, only the hum of the ship and her own breathing filled the void. She was alone now, completely alone. The fate of the fleet rested on her shoulders. The odds were impossible, and yet, as she looked out at the endless corridors ahead, a small, almost defiant smile touched her lips. They thought humans were weak. They thought humans were predictable. They had never faced someone like Ilara Kor, and soon they would learn why.
The shuttle's doors sealed behind her with a hiss, and the massive hull of the alien flagship loomed around her like a living nightmare. The air inside the shuttle hummed, vibrating with energy she didn't fully understand. Every surface outside her tiny craft seemed alive, glowing faintly in eerie alien patterns. She swallowed hard, but fear was only a tool, not a weakness. Ilara checked the display again. The interior layout of the ship was unlike any human design. Corridors twisted at impossible angles. Doorways seemed to shift as she watched. The alien architecture was confusing, almost disorienting, designed to keep intruders lost or trapped. She stepped out of the shuttle carefully. The floor beneath her boots seemed cold, almost organic. Her breathing was steady, her senses razor-sharp. Every shadow could conceal danger. Every flicker of light could be a patrol moving silently toward her. Ilara moved along the corridor, her footsteps muted against the strange metal. She kept close to the walls, listening. The sound of her own heartbeat was loud in her ears. Sensors on her suit flickered. One patrol, two patrols, more than she expected. She crouched behind a support beam as a group of alien soldiers passed. They were taller than humans, with glowing armor and weapons that hummed with deadly energy. They did not notice her. Humans were not part of their calculations. To them, she was just another faint anomaly in the vastness of their ship. Ilara exhaled slowly. She had expected more resistance already, but that only meant she had time. Time to move, time to think. She advanced down a twisting corridor, every step precise. Her eyes scanned every door, every corner, every panel. Somewhere in this labyrinth was the core, the heart of the ship, and the key to destroying it. She reached a junction and paused. A patrol passed by, slower than usual. She noticed a small gap in their pathing, a tiny window she could slip through. Timing was everything. A second too soon or too late, and she would be seen. She darted across the open floor, sliding into a narrow side passage, just as the aliens turned the corner. Her pulse pounded, but her mind stayed calm. She had trained for situations like this. Every human mission had taught her that patience and observation could overcome brute strength. The passage led to a chamber filled with strange machinery. Lights pulsed in rhythm with the hum of the ship. She crouched behind a large console, pulling out her hacking tools. The display on the wall showed energy flows and power levels she barely understood, but her tools could map them. She traced the circuits, found weak points, and planted small devices that could disrupt the ship's systems later. Suddenly, a noise made her freeze, a low mechanical growl, something alive, yet not quite alive. She turned slightly and saw the ship itself reacting, almost aware of her presence. Panels shifted, doors closed with sharp clicks, and the hum of the engines changed tone. It was subtle, but it was there. The flagship was aware. Ilara's mind raced. The ship was not just a vessel, it was a predator, and she was inside its mouth. She moved on, faster now, but carefully. Another patrol appeared at the end of the hall. She ducked into a shadow, holding her breath. The aliens moved slowly, scanning the walls. She could feel their attention closing in, like predators sensing prey. Then a small trickle of luck came. One of the aliens stopped suddenly, listening to a sound Ilara had just made. She held perfectly still. The alien raised a weapon, and then, as if deciding she was nothing, moved on. She exhaled silently, allowing herself only a micro-smile. Even here she could survive. Humans always adapted. The corridors twisted again. She paused at a junction where 3 paths met. The sensors in her suit detected heavy security ahead. The core was close. She could feel it in the ship's hum, but the patrols were dense. She would have to be smart. Not fast, not strong, smart. Ilara pulled a small device from her pack, a jammer designed to scramble electronic sensors. She placed it carefully on the floor and activated it. Red lights flickered on the alien armor, weapons paused, and motion sensors blinked uncertainly. The patrols hesitated, confused. Perfect. She dashed past them, moving deeper into the heart of the ship. Every step took her closer to the core, closer to the power that controlled the alien fleet. The corridors narrowed, the walls pulsing faintly with energy, as if the ship itself were a beating heart. She could hear the subtle vibrations, feel the warmth in her boots as the engines sent energy through the hull. Then she reached a vast chamber. The ceiling towered above her, and in the center, a glowing orb hovered, radiating waves of energy. This had to be it, the core. From here, she could shut down the ship, maybe even turn it against its own fleet. But before she could move closer, a shadow fell across the chamber. She looked up. 2 alien soldiers, larger and more heavily armed than the ones before, blocked the exit. She was trapped. Her heart rate spiked, but she did not panic. Her mind worked faster than fear. She had a plan, one last improvisation. With a swift motion, she threw a small device toward the far wall. It exploded with a flash of light and a burst of sound, disorienting the aliens. In that instant, she rolled forward, pressing herself against the protective field. The aliens recovered quickly, but it was too late. Ilara was inside the chamber, close enough to start her work. She could feel the energy radiating off the orb, the pulsing rhythm like a beating heart of the ship itself. She took a deep breath. The hardest part was ahead. Every step now mattered. One mistake, one moment of hesitation, and she would be nothing more than a memory. Yet even as fear tried to creep in, she felt something else. Clarity, power, purpose. Humans were small, yes, weak, yes, but clever, adaptable, fearless in ways the aliens could never understand. And she was human. Ilara reached for the core controls, her fingers trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of what she was about to do. The fate of the fleet, maybe even the galaxy, rested on her shoulders. She was alone, but humans, she thought, were never really alone when they dared to act. The ship pulsed around her, and Ilara Kor smiled.
Ilara's hands hovered over the glowing controls of the core. The alien energy pulsed beneath her fingers, like a heartbeat she could feel in her bones. The chamber seemed alive. Every light, every shadow moved as if watching her, waiting. She took a slow breath. This was the heart of the flagship, the center of the alien fleet's power, and what she was about to discover would change everything.
She activated her scanner, sending tiny probes into the orb. The energy readings were not what she expected. The power was immense, far beyond what any single ship should contain. But it wasn't just energy, it was intelligence, something conscious, something ancient. A chill ran down her spine. The ship was not just a vessel, it was alive, and it was thinking. Ilara stepped back, studying the chamber. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting subtly. Panels shifted like scales, and the hum of the engines rose and fell as if synchronized to the core's pulse. Her suit's sensors confirmed it. This was no machine in the human sense. This was a living weapon, a hive mind that controlled every alien ship in the fleet. She realized the full scope of the danger. This flagship was not only their command center, it was the brain of the entire enemy force. Destroy it, and the fleet would collapse. Fail, and humanity would face not just ships, but a predator that could adapt, evolve, and hunt them down relentlessly. Ilara's mind raced. Humans were clever, yes, but the aliens had something else, something deeper. She needed to find a way to turn it against itself, but first she had to understand it. Her scanner probed deeper into the core. Patterns emerged, strange and beautiful, like a dance of light and energy. Thoughts? Memories? She didn't know, but she saw one thing clearly. The ship was not naturally hostile. Its attacks were calculated, precise, but reactive. It responded to threats. It adapted. It learned. And now it was learning her. Ilara felt a shiver of fear, not for herself, but for her fleet. She could imagine the humans watching from afar, holding their breath, hoping against hope. Every moment she spent inside this living nightmare was a gamble with everything they had left. Suddenly, a sharp noise cut through the chamber. Panels flickered violently, and the lights pulsed faster. The orb glowed brighter, almost as if it had noticed her, scanning it. Ilara froze. Her suit's sensors screamed. Multiple high-energy signatures were converging on her position. The ship was aware. It was reacting. She ducked behind the nearest console. The walls rippled, and a low, deep vibration filled the chamber. She could feel it through her boots, through her hands pressed against the panel. The flagship was alive, and it was aware of her. Her mind worked quickly. The ship's intelligence relied on patterns, on predictability. Humans were unpredictable. That was their strength. She could use that. Ilara pulled a small device from her pack, a hacking tool designed to mimic the energy signatures of the ship itself. If she could trick it, even briefly, she might gain access to the core's systems. She placed the device near the orb and activated it. A surge of energy pulsed outward, and for a moment the ship paused, as if confused. Perfect.
Ilara's hands hovered over the glowing controls of the core. The alien energy pulsed beneath her fingers, like a heartbeat she could feel in her bones. The chamber seemed alive. Every light, every shadow moved as if watching her, waiting. She took a slow breath. This was the heart of the flagship, the center of the alien fleet's power, and what she was about to discover would change everything. She activated her scanner, sending tiny probes into the orb. The energy readings were not what she expected. The power was immense, far beyond what any single ship should contain. But it wasn't just energy, it was intelligence, something conscious, something ancient. A chill ran down her spine. The ship was not just a vessel, it was alive, and it was thinking. Ilara stepped back, studying the chamber. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting subtly. Panels shifted like scales, and the hum of the engines rose and fell as if synchronized to the core's pulse. Her suit's sensors confirmed it. This was no machine in the human sense. This was a living weapon, a hive mind that controlled every alien ship in the fleet. She realized the full scope of the danger.
This flagship was not only their command center, it was the brain of the entire enemy force. Destroy it, and the fleet would collapse, fail, and humanity would face not just ships, but a predator that could adapt, evolve, and hunt them down relentlessly. Ilara's mind raced. Humans were clever, yes, but the aliens had something else, something deeper. She needed to find a way to turn it against itself, but first she had to understand it. Her scanner probed deeper into the core. Patterns emerged, strange and beautiful, like a dance of light and energy. Thoughts? Memories? She didn't know, but she saw one thing clearly. The ship was not naturally hostile. Its attacks were calculated, precise, but reactive. It responded to threats. It adapted. It learned. And now it was learning her. Ilara felt a shiver of fear, not for herself, but for her fleet. She could imagine the humans watching from afar, holding their breath, hoping against hope. Every moment she spent inside this living nightmare was a gamble with everything they had left. Suddenly, a sharp noise cut through the chamber. Panels flickered violently, and the lights pulsed faster. The orb glowed brighter, almost as if it had noticed her, scanning it. Ilara froze. Her suit sensors screamed. Multiple high-energy signatures were converging on her position. The ship was aware. It was reacting. She ducked behind the nearest console. The walls rippled, and a low, deep vibration filled the chamber. She could feel it through her boots, through her hands pressed against the panel. The flagship was alive, and it was aware of her. Her mind worked quickly. The ship's intelligence relied on patterns, on predictability. Humans were unpredictable. That was their strength. She could use that. Ilara pulled a small device from her pack, a hacking tool designed to mimic the energy signatures of the ship itself. If she could trick it, even briefly, she might gain access to the core's systems. She placed the device near the orb and activated it. A surge of energy pulsed outward, and for a moment the ship paused, as if confused. Perfect. She moved closer to the orb. Tiny lights danced along its surface, responding to her presence. She could almost feel its curiosity, its intelligence probing her mind, trying to understand what she was. A thrill ran through her veins. This was more than survival. This was a battle of wits, a human mind against something older and smarter than she had ever faced. Ilara studied the core's interface. Symbols, strange and alien, glowed on the surface. With her device feeding it false readings, she began decoding the functions. Slowly, a plan formed. If she could reroute the ship's control, even partially, she could turn the flagship against the fleet. She could make it self-destruct, or worse, attack its own ships. But it was dangerous. One wrong input, one mistake, and the ship would detect her deception, and if it did, there would be no escape. Her fingers moved quickly, pressing, twisting, manipulating the alien controls as the orb pulsed faster and faster. The lights around her dimmed and brightened, responding to every action. The flagship was alive, aware, powerful, yet uncertain. She felt a spark of hope. Even the most intelligent predator could be outsmarted by a human willing to risk everything. Suddenly, a sharp noise cut through the chamber. Panels flickered violently, and the lights pulsed faster. The orb glowed brighter, almost as if it had noticed her scanning it. Ilara froze. Her suit sensors screamed. Multiple high-energy signatures were converging on her position. The ship was aware. It was reacting. She ducked behind the nearest console. The walls rippled, and a low, deep vibration filled the chamber. She could feel it through her boots, through her hands pressed against the panel. The flagship was alive, and it was aware of her. Her mind worked quickly. The ship's intelligence relied on patterns, on predictability. Humans were unpredictable. That was their strength. She could use that. Ilara pulled a small device from her pack, a hacking tool designed to mimic the energy signatures of the ship itself. If she could trick it, even briefly, she might gain access to the core's systems. She placed the device near the orb and activated it. A surge of energy pulsed outward, and for a moment the ship paused, as if confused. Perfect. She moved closer to the orb. Tiny lights danced along its surface, responding to her presence. She could almost feel its curiosity, its intelligence probing her mind, trying to understand what she was. A thrill ran through her veins. This was more than survival. This was a battle of wits.
Alara stood before the glowing core, her fingers hovering over the alien controls. The ship pulsed like a living heart, responding to every thought, every move she made. She could feel it sensing her presence, analyzing her. But now, she had the advantage. She understood it. She could manipulate it. The first step was subtle. She fed false commands into the core, small and precise, enough to confuse the flagship, but not enough to trigger alarm. The corridors outside her chamber hummed with activity as alien crews reacted to phantom commands, moving to positions that no longer existed. Her pulse raced. The fleet outside the flagship had no idea what was happening. The enemy ships shifted in formation, their weapons misaligned, engines pulsing erratically. Chaos was spreading through the alien ranks, and she had only just begun. Ilara's mind worked faster than fear. Every alien system had a pattern, a rhythm. She had learned it in minutes. Humans thrived on unpredictability. The aliens could adapt, yes, but they could not anticipate the creativity of one determined human with nothing to lose. She accessed the navigation interface. With a few calculated inputs, she sent false signals to the flagship's external sensors. Enemy ships detected phantom targets, moving to intercept imaginary threats. Weapons fired at empty space. Engines accelerated towards points that did not exist. The fleet was unraveling, a thread pulled by a single human hand. Ilara smiled. They thought the flagship was untouchable. They thought humans were weak. But now, the truth became clear. The flagship was vulnerable. Its intelligence was vast, yes, but rigid. It could calculate, adapt, but it could not imagine the impossible. She planted a series of small energy disruptors around the core. They would overload the ship's systems in a cascade of power surges, turning its own energy against it. But timing was critical. Too early, and the ship might detect the tampering. Too late, and she would be caught. Her fingers flew over the controls, each movement precise, deliberate. The lights around the chamber flickered with every command she sent. The humming of the engines shifted in tone, almost like the ship was aware of her deception. It paused, hesitant, unsure. Then she acted. With a deep breath, she initiated the first sequence. Energy rippled through the corridors. Alien crews scrambled as panels blinked red. Weapons systems activated and then shut down erratically. Engines roared to life, then died. Confusion spread like wildfire through the fleet. Ilara watched the display as the flagship transmitted false commands to the surrounding ships. One by one, alien vessels began moving into positions that would make them vulnerable. The human fleet, hidden in the distance, could only watch, confused but hopeful. But the ship was not defeated yet. The core pulsed violently, as if resisting her control. The alien intelligence tried to analyze her, tried to anticipate her next move. Its patterns shifted, adapting to her interference. And Ilara realized the truth. The ship was learning. Her pulse quickened. One wrong move now, and it could detect her, eliminate her instantly. But she had anticipated this. Humans thrived in moments like this, when every decision counted, when fear sharpened the mind instead of dulling it. She took another deep breath and began the final phase. The disruptors she had planted would trigger in a precise sequence, causing the core to overload. The flagship would turn its own power against the fleet, striking at every vessel that relied on its command.
She activated the devices remotely, watching as energy rippled through the ship's systems. Lights flashed, panels glowed, alarms screamed. The alien crews ran in panic, trying to regain control, but it was too late. The flagship was now a weapon against itself. Outside, the human fleet saw the first explosions. Alien ships collided, their formations collapsing as the flagship's systems betrayed them. Confusion turned to panic, and panic turned to chaos. The humans had never seen anything like it. One human, inside the heart of the enemy, had turned the tide of battle with nothing but her courage and her mind. Ilara's body tensed. She could feel the vibrations through the floor, the pulsing energy of the core reaching a critical point. The ship was dangerous, alive, but it was also blind, reacting to the very manipulations she had introduced. She activated the final command. A pulse of energy shot through the flagship, cascading outward. Alien ships rocked, some exploded in blinding flashes of light. Engines flared, weapons misfired, and the fleet's cohesion shattered. The flagship itself groaned, the hull vibrating violently as the energy she had unleashed tore through its systems. Ilara stepped back, heart pounding. She had done it. The impossible had become possible. She had turned the flagship against its fleet. But there was no time to celebrate. The ship was still alive, still dangerous. Every moment she lingered increased the risk of discovery. She looked at the core, glowing and unstable. With a grim smile, she knew what she had to do next. She had to escape before the very weapon she had created turned on her. The corridors around her began to shake. Alarms blared violently. The flagship's intelligence was trying to respond, to regain control, but she had outsmarted it for now. The alien fleets outside were collapsing, retreating, or destroyed. Humanity's survival depended on her next move. Ilara clenched her fists, feeling the surge of triumph and danger at the same time. She had faced impossible odds and won. She had turned the enemy's greatest weapon against itself. But the hardest part remained: escape. One misstep now, and all would be lost. She took another deep breath, her eyes on the glowing orb of the core. The human fleet's fate, the survival of countless lives, rested on her shoulders, and she would not fail. Not now, not ever. The ship pulsed violently, energy cascading in waves. Ilara smiled. The turn had been made. Humanity had a chance, and she was the reason they still might survive.
The core pulsed violently behind her, glowing brighter than ever. Energy surged through the corridors of the alien flagship, and the ship itself seemed to shiver with the force of what she had unleashed. Panels flickered and snapped, alarms screamed in every frequency, and the very floor shook beneath her boots. Every step she took carried the risk of being thrown off balance, or worse, being discovered. Ilara didn't pause. She had memorized the corridors during her approach, but now, in the chaos of her sabotage, the layout was shifting, almost alive. Doors opened and closed unexpectedly. Walls extended or retracted. The ship seemed to fight her as much as it obeyed her commands. But she had anticipated this. Humans thrived in unpredictability. She sprinted down the twisting hallways, her pulse racing in time with the pulsing energy of the core. Behind her, the corridors exploded in flashes of light as her planted disruptors detonated. Energy cascaded outward, knocking panels loose and throwing alien soldiers across the floors. Screams echoed through the halls, sharp, alien, terrified. She didn't slow. She couldn't. At a junction, a squad of elite alien guards appeared, faster and larger than any she had encountered. Their glowing armor blazed in the darkness. They raised weapons that hummed with lethal energy. Ilara's mind worked faster than instinct. She ducked to the side, rolling under their line of fire, then pressed a button on her wrist device.
A small EMP pulse erupted, frying the guards' suits for a moment. Sparks flew, and the aliens staggered, disoriented. She used the opening, darting past them like a shadow. Humans could not overpower them physically, but humans could think faster, improvise, and exploit every moment. The corridors shook violently as the flagship's core continued its unstable pulse. Parts of the walls collapsed. Energy arcs danced across the floor. Every step she took carried the risk of death, yet Ilara moved with precision. Every move, every breath was calculated. She reached the shuttle docking bay. The small vessel was still intact, but the corridor leading to it was crumbling, jagged metal twisting around her path. Panels above snapped and fell, sending sparks raining down. She leapt over a widening gap, landing hard but steady. Her fingers flew over the shuttle controls. Doors hissed open, the ramp extending just as the alien ship groaned with the strain of the collapsing systems. She could hear the alien intelligence pulsing, angry, struggling to regain control. But it was too late. She had already anticipated the chain reaction. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the bay. Debris flew past her. The alien flagship's core was destabilizing faster than she had expected. One wrong move, and she would be trapped inside as the entire ship imploded. She didn't hesitate. Launch sequence activated. Engines hummed, and the shuttle shot forward like a silver streak. The ramp retracted just in time, shielding her from falling debris. The hull around her shook violently as the ship's systems overloaded. Energy arcs leapt across the bay walls, and alien alarms screamed a final chaotic warning. Outside, the human fleet watched in awe. Through their sensors, they could see the alien flagship's outer hull starting to fracture. Light and energy burst from the seams. Smaller alien ships spun out of control, some exploding in brilliant flashes. The humans could not believe what they were witnessing. One human, alone, had turned the tide of a battle that seemed hopeless. Inside the shuttle, Ilara exhaled, her chest heaving. Her hands were steady, her eyes focused. She navigated the twisting debris field outside the flagship, avoiding falling panels and energy arcs that could tear the shuttle apart. Every second counted. One miscalculation, and she would be consumed by the very ship she had just crippled. A massive explosion erupted behind her as the flagship's core finally failed. A blinding wave of energy surged outward, rocking the shuttle violently. She was thrown against her harness, but she gritted her teeth and pressed forward. Humans were fragile, yes, but they endured, adapted, and survived where machines could not. The enemy fleet was in chaos. Without the flagship's command, alien ships collided with one another, engines flaring, weapons misfiring. Confusion spread faster than fire. Humanity's few remaining vessels moved cautiously, picking off isolated enemies, but none dared approach too closely. The battlefield was a storm of fire and debris, and Ilara was at its center, her courage the spark that ignited hope. Finally, she reached the edge of the debris field. She glanced back. The flagship, once an unstoppable force, was now a shattered husk, glowing faintly as the last remnants of energy pulsed outward. Its fleet, leaderless and disorganized, began a slow retreat. Humans who had been trapped in fear now cheered silently in their ships, unable to believe what they had seen. Ilara guided the shuttle to a safe distance, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She looked at the stars, black and infinite, and felt the weight of what she had done. One human, alone, had entered the heart of the enemy, faced impossible odds, and survived. And in doing so, she had changed the course of a battle that seemed hopeless. The shuttle's engines purred as she adjusted course back towards the human fleet. She could see their ships now, moving cautiously towards her, scanning for survivors, scanning for threats. Ilara allowed herself a small smile. She had done more than survive. She had turned the enemy's greatest strength into their greatest weakness. Even as she approached her fleet, she knew the danger was not over. The enemy would regroup eventually, new leaders would rise, and the battle was far from finished. But for now, humanity had a victory, and it had been won not with numbers or brute force, but with courage, ingenuity, and one human who refused to accept defeat. Ilara exhaled, her gaze steady. She had risked everything, and it had paid off. The flagship would never recover. The enemy fleet would never forget what had happened here. And humanity, small, fragile, underestimated, had survived. For now.
The human fleet gathered cautiously around the edge of the battlefield, watching the wreckage of the enemy flagship float in space. It was barely recognizable now, a shattered skeleton of dark metal and flickering energy. Its weapons were silent, its systems dead, and its aura of invincibility gone. Commander Yaren stood on the bridge of the lead human ship, still gripping the railing as he tried to comprehend what had just happened. How? He whispered, almost to himself. How could one human? Then the shuttle appeared, a single silver streak gliding through the debris, untouched, unharmed. Every eye in the fleet followed it, and then the doors opened, and she stepped out. Captain Ilara Kor, alive, alone. She walked down the ramp onto the command deck, every movement calm, almost casual, but her eyes were sharp, scanning every face. The room erupted in stunned silence, and then in cheers. Officers who had doubted her before now stared in awe. She had done the impossible. Yaren stepped forward, his voice trembling with respect. "Captain, you survived, and you destroyed the flagship. You've saved us all." Ilara nodded, her face serious. "It's not over," she said quietly. "The enemy will regroup, but their fleet is fractured, disorganized. We have a chance now, a real chance." She looked out at the stars where the alien ships were retreating, scattered and leaderless. The humans in the fleet watched in disbelief as ships that had seemed unstoppable moments ago were now fleeing. Some tried to regroup but collided with each other, engines failing, weapons misfiring. It was chaos, all caused by her single act of bravery. Ilara walked to the tactical display, pointing to the remnants of the flagship. This ship was more than just a vessel. It was alive, a living weapon controlling the fleet. But even a creature that seems invincible has weaknesses. It underestimated humans, our unpredictability, our creativity, our courage, and that's what we used. Silence fell across the bridge. Everyone understood. One human mind, alone, had outsmarted a force that had terrified entire star systems. Humans, small and fragile compared to their enemies, had survived and thrived where no one expected. Yaren shook his head, almost in disbelief. "I thought we were doomed. I thought there was no way to stop them. But you did it. How?" Ilara's eyes softened, but her voice remained firm. "We humans adapt. We improvise. We fight in ways that others cannot predict, and we don't give up, not even when the odds are impossible. That's why we survived." Outside the ships, the remnants of the alien fleet began drifting, leaderless and directionless. Some vessels fired blindly, while others drifted powerless through space. Humanity's small fleet, battered and fragile, moved in formation, taking advantage of the enemy's confusion. The tactical display showed the extent of the damage. Entire squadrons had been destroyed, not by brute force, but by the flagship's own systems collapsing under the chaos Ilara had engineered. She had turned the enemy's greatest strength into their most destructive weakness. A young officer, barely 20, approached her hesitantly. "Captain, we all thought it was over. We didn't think anyone could survive that. You've proven something incredible." Ilara smiled faintly, though her fatigue showed in her eyes. "Humans are often underestimated.
she said. "That's our advantage. We are not the strongest, we are not the fastest, but we are clever, determined, and willing to risk everything when it counts. And sometimes that's enough." The fleet's communications buzzed as ships checked in, reporting survivors, damages, and fleeing enemies. The voice of humanity, small and fragile, now carried across the void with newfound strength. They had survived a battle that should have destroyed them, and the galaxy would remember it. Yaren stepped beside her, gazing at the shattered flagship in the distance. The fleet will never be the same, not the enemy and not us. One human changed everything. One human. Ilara nodded, her eyes fixed on the dark remnants floating in space. They will recover eventually, but they will never forget. And humanity, we know our own strength now. That is what matters. The human ship slowly turned toward home, battered but victorious. The silence of space was broken only by the hum of engines and the distant crackle of communications. The battlefield, once filled with fear and despair, now held the quiet of triumph. Ilara stood alone for a moment on the observation deck, staring at the stars. She thought of the countless humans who had lived and died under impossible odds, the ones who had fought despite being underestimated, ignored, or dismissed. She thought of the fleet behind her, alive because of her courage, ingenuity, and willingness to risk everything. And she knew that humanity had changed, not through numbers or technology alone, but through spirit, through the courage to act when no one else could, through the unpredictability that even the greatest enemy could not anticipate. Somewhere in the void, the enemy would rebuild, new leaders would rise, new strategies would form. But one truth remained. Humans had survived. Humans had fought. And humans, small, fragile, underestimated, had triumphed in the face of impossible odds. Ilara turned from the observation deck, her expression calm but determined. The fleet was safe, for now, but more battles lay ahead, and she, like every human who had survived against impossible odds, would face them, not with fear, not with hesitation, but with courage, wit, and a will that no enemy could ever predict. The stars stretched endlessly ahead. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, humanity had the upper hand, and they would never forget what one human had done.